My name is Erik Segelbaum. I am the owner, founder, and Chief Vinnovation Officer of SOMLYAY, SOMLYAY, a full-service hospitality consulting organization. I've been in the restaurant business now for the better part of 3 decades, 10 years in back-of-the-house fine dining, and in my 17th year in front of the house as a sommelier. And I started SOMLYAY as a means to help pass on the things I've learned over time running corporate-level beverage programs and everything from fine dining to high volume and casual and everything in between, as a medium for me to pass along the things I've learned to the industry at large and sort of help everybody do better business. A wine program technician is someone who has a facility with the unsexy part of the business. It is operations, finance, organization, revenue driving strategies, profitability, copy editing and formatting skills of the wine list. It's all the stuff that isn't the cool parts, like memorizing Grand Crus of here or sub-regions of there, or knowing all these wonderful facts and figures and esoteric bits of information about the wines, the wineries, the winemakers, etc. It's the non-glamorous stuff, but it's really what drives the business of wine. Absolutely. So the article was the first of an ongoing column that we'll be running every month or every edition in Somm Journal called The Business of Wine. And the idea behind that was there really is an absolute dearth of knowledge when it comes to the business side of these things. Again, it's not the fun, glamorous, sexy thing. No young somm says, I can't wait to get my PIN so I can do cost of goods calculations. But it is a critically important part of what we do in our industry and in our jobs. And you know, the title of the article, we softened it, because my original title, and I wanted to be inflammatory, was Most Sommeliers Suck at Their Jobs, Here's Why. So we decided to soften that up to Dear Somm, Your Job Isn't Quite What You Think It Is. And that's because most sommeliers think that their passion is their job, and so that their job is therefore, I love wine, therefore I study wine, I talk about wine, I sell wine. And frankly, that is not the job of a sommelier. That's the thing you get to do when everything else that is your job is done. A sommelier's job is to occasionally build, but always operate and execute a well-organized, well-designed, financially viable, stable beverage program that is easy to use for staff, for guests, and for just the general operation at large, that not just collects money but drives revenue at proper profitability while providing extraordinary guest experiences that fit the needs of whatever the concept is, and then also importantly has a well-trained staff that understands the ethos of the program, how it ties into the restaurant, how to navigate the wine list with guests. And when all of that is said and done, dear Somm, your job is to talk about wine and sell wine, but that is at the very bottom of the barrel of what's important. So blended cost of goods is something that people struggle with. Honestly, cost of goods is something that people struggle with. Most somms don't even know the cost of goods formula. By the way, for the love of God, know that formula. It's not acceptable to say I plug it into the computer or Excel figures it out or we have a program for that or accounting does it. You need to know the cost of goods formula. It is it's the financial Bible of everything you do operationally. But most people misunderstand the relationship of an individual line item's cost of goods with the blended cost of goods, which is the entire category of sales within a program. So as an example, the markup on any particular wine isn't relevant in a vacuum. The markup on that wine is relevant as a percentage of what it is to all the other wines that are sold, the frequency with which it sells, and the contribution margin that it gives to the program. You don't put percentage points in the bank. So a highly marked up wine, it could be good for revenue, and it could be good for profit, and the percentage could look good. But a low marked up wine, a lot of operators and even some say, oh, whoa, your cost of goods on that is 45%. It's like, yeah, but I'm running a 45% cost of goods because it's a $900 wine and I'm making it a compelling thing. So even though the percentages are high, every time I sell that thing at 45% cost of goods, I'm putting $600-ish of gross profit into the bank. And that's the important bit. And also with the infrequency of which that wine sells, the by the glass and the lower cost of goods markups that sell much more will carry over the cost of that. When you blend it all out, the total wine revenue and the total wine cost equals out to a healthy, stable blended cost of goods. So there is no standard formula for this. It really depends on the concept. Most importantly, you need to know what your glass pour is. Are you pouring 5 glasses per bottle or 4? Typically more fine dining tends to be 4 glasses per bottle. Typically more mid-tier or casual tends to be 5 glasses for a bottle. But the typical rule for buy the glass is that your first glass should sell the bottle. And that's how you mitigate loss, waste, over pour, oxidation, if you don't have volume on it, any number of things, or some of the common things like at the end of the night the bartenders forgot to put corks in 3 of the bottles and the closing manager didn't check, and so you come in the next day and those bottles are lost. So really the idea is whatever the wine costs you, however many glasses you're pouring, the pretty universal industry standard is your first glass sells the bottle, and that's a healthy way to look at glass pours. Cost pour percentage is again, it's sort of an idea of how the cost of putting that glass on the table relates to its contribution to the revenue situation and also drives the revenue. So, in a digital age where people have access to a lot of information about what wines cost and what your competitive set is charging, it's even more important to be aware of things like this. And the one thing that I think a lot of people make a mistake with is they put very well-known wines that are all over their comp set, that are all over the same market, and they don't take that into account. So think about the cost per percentage, basically what your cost is as a percentage of the price that the guest is paying, but also knowing that a healthy cost per percentage means you'll have better frequency on that wine, and an unhealthy cost per percentage, because perhaps a more popular wine is known, means that it will not only reduce your frequency of sales, but it will also calibrate a negative experience that your guests think your wines are overpriced and overmarked. So when I go into a conversation about a challenge program that needs to be improving financially, the very first thing I want to know is what is your frequency of inventory, what are your budgets, what are your forecasts, what are your variances, and usually they're like, what do you mean? What variance reports? What do you mean forecast to budget and all of that? I'll ask, what are your purchases to sales? What are your inventory cycles? I mean, I was working with one program like, oh, we don't do inventory. I'm like, well, how do you know what you have? Like, well, we just look. I'm like, okay, well, how do you know what it costs you? Like, well, we just guess. Like, well, this is what your problem is. So usually those questions reveal that there aren't stable financial systems in place. So the very first thing is to stabilize those financial systems. The next step is often that the inventory is very dirty. Perhaps a vintage changes and they don't make it a new line item, or they don't input it as a new item, and if they're using an automated system, or prices fluctuate and they're not paying attention. Or what I find a lot is like, you need to audit your invoices, because the price that you're quoted is often not the price you pay, and it's usually just like, especially if you get in a state where you can have special pricing and somebody forgot to flick a switch or make an input and change things. But for a high volume program, if you're paying 49 cents more per bottle and something you're doing 10 cases a week of, that could be tens of thousands of dollars of loss over a year. So the very first thing I do to diagnose a program is I could care less what the concept of the restaurant is, what the theme of the cuisine, what the guest experience is. I want to take a look at what the financial systems are. And 99% of the time, that is where the problem lies. So once we clean up those systems, we can then work on improving the other aspects of the program. Inventory management's a very complicated thing, because everybody has their ways of wanting to do it. Frankly, I love Excel. There are plenty of programs that work well. There are plenty of industry design programs, but I don't think anything is perfect. What I like about Excel is that it is infinitely sortable on whatever factors you want to apply. So you can add subsets and subcolumns of information, and as long as your data is clean, you can pull a lot of incredibly rich, very useful information from Excel. But there's a physical aspect to organizing I think a lot of people miss. And it's human nature to want to categorize and classify things together. Oh, all of our Burgundies are on this wall, or all of our Carnero Chardonnays are here. And that's great, but what people need to remember is a location, whether it's a physical, large square bin, or a single slot, or a row on a metro shelf, whatever your bin is an address, and that address doesn't care who lives there. So it's really important that anybody can find the address. And the biggest problem most programs have, especially ones that aren't financially sound, are that there is some sort of internally understood, I know where everything is thing going on with the wine director or the sommelier, or some weird codification where they get a new wine and therefore, oh, well, this is a Burgundy, it's got to go with the Burgundy, so now I have to move 600 bottles over to make a slot for this to fit in there, and that just doesn't matter. If you're going into an apartment building and I tell you I'm in apartment 1402, you know you're going to the 14th floor, and you know that it's probably in between 1401 and 1403, and you can always find that. So if you are trying to organize that all of the people from who have no children live on the 14th floor, and all of the families with 2 children live between the 15th and 18th floors, and anyone from Europe lives on the 9th floor. That's what people do when they try to organize their cellars based on something other than this is an address, that will always be this address, and whatever's in there is irrelevant as long as everybody knows how to find that address. So to create a viable wine list from day one, you really need to keep a lot of things in mind. First of all, know your concept. A lot of sommeliers, their beverage program tends to be a record collection of their favorite music, but that's not always what suits the restaurant. What your wine program should be is a well-mastered soundtrack to the concept, the vibe, the guest demand, or if it doesn't, if the guest demand is different from what you're trying to create, what you're trying to create from a guest experience, as well as just a holistic idea of everything that's going to come together to make that experience worthwhile. Your wine list needs to suit all of those things and still be financially viable. It can't just be, I love these wines, whether they're esoteric or not. You can't just load up on the things you love and just sit back and be like, whoa, they don't sell, or just expect that you're going to force your will on guests. Remember, your wine program is not yours. It belongs to the owners, even if you're a co-owner, and your job is to make it viable and profitable and a good experience for your guests. So don't lose sight of that. I mean, that was like kind of two, and that was kind of like all 3 in 1. So I'll back it up. So like number 1 is know your audience. Number 2 is know your concept. And number 3 is pull yourself out of it. And remember, this isn't about what you like, it's about what serves your business. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't put your stamp on it. Just make sure that you are also serving the operation. So the 3 most common inefficiencies in a struggling wine program are 1, a lack of financial systems, 2, a lack of physical organization, and 3, a lack of training. And training doesn't mean that your servers or your bartenders know everything about every wine. And training doesn't mean that they can tell you how many years in barrel and what the fermentation process was, and whether it was hot ferment or cool ferment, and the subsoils and subregions where the wine came from. And none of that is, or the winemaker, none of that is relevant. Training means your team that is going to be involved in merchandising that to guests or recommending that to guests has an understanding of what the ethos of your wine program is, how the list is physically organized, and how to navigate guests through that. And often those aren't there either because there's no organization to the program or because the training isn't there. And with a sommelier cannot be in every transaction. They cannot be talking to every guest, even in a 12-seat dining room. So you need to make it so that people who are maybe not wine passionate, maybe not wine knowledgeable, who are maybe doing this because it's the best way to pay for school or medical bills or their family, or make a lot of money without a degree trade skill, not saying they don't have those things, but there's great money to be made as a server or bartender in the restaurant business that you can make a lot of money relatively easily. We have to recognize that those people might not give a crap about wine, and we have to make it not about, oh, you need to know this because I care about it, and make it, here's why knowing how to navigate these channels will make you more money. I have very few rules about what never do, always do, but the one thing I can say categorically is 100% always the wrong way to organize a list is in price order. It's a long explanation of why that is, but the very short explanation is we are psychologically predisposed to subconsciously reject spending money because we know from birth that money is our value, it's our future, it's our sustenance, it's our meals, it's the roof over our head, it's the joys that we like in life. So it's irrelevant how that spend affects you. Even if it's spending 50 cents on a pack of gum and you're a billionaire, there's still, whether you're aware of it or not, a subconscious thing back there that kind of tries to pull back from the spend. When you organize by price, you make the conversation about how many dollars you want to spend. You make it a transactional situation, which is a terrible way to do that. A good program is about creating experiences and meaningful relationships, and you don't make meaningful relationships with dollars, you make it with taste, you make it with matches, you make it with stories. So when you organize by price, you might, somebody might hit their point at $60. They don't want to spend more, but maybe at $75 you have a wine from a winery where they visited and would absolutely buy it, but they would never see it because they never get past 60. Or maybe at $100 you have a vintage from the year of one of their children, or the year they met, or a birthday or an anniversary or something, and they're like, oh well, I wouldn't normally do this, but I've got to drink this thing from 1976 because that's when I was born. So absolutely, if you organize by price, they're never going to see that stuff. Sure. So a great way to reduce environmental footprint and also make your bar service run a little bit more efficiently is to embrace keg wine. Format does not dictate quality. Now, there are plenty of less than stellar wines that are available in keg format, but there are increasingly more and more, like hundreds and hundreds of absolutely fantastic wines that are available in draft. It is a more efficient system. You have better portion control, better loss control. You can fit a lot more juice in a much smaller space. Depending on how you have it organized, you don't have to worry about the space behind the bar for keeping all the bottles. Your bar back isn't constantly taking out Slim Jims full of empty bottles. Your guests aren't hearing the of things. Ooh, didn't mean to spill that. Of bottles constantly being thrown into Slim Jims in service and reverberating through the dining room. It gives everybody more, and your bartenders aren't constantly opening bottles, cutting their hands on foil, missing caps. I mean, there's so many reasons that's great, not just from an environmental standpoint, but from a service efficiency standpoint too. So I love keg wine. Just remember, format does not dictate quality. Not all wines in draft are great, but because they're in draft doesn't mean they're not great. Sure. So we talked a little bit today about sort of different price breaks and price echelons where the right price or the right last digit sort of changes a buying decision. Again, it's a pretty long conversation, but there are definitely some points where up or down a couple dollars makes a huge difference. And this is just empiricism, but I was responsible for $100 million of beverage from 40 different restaurants. So I've done the study in everything from Michelin star fine dining French to casual modern Mexican to everything in between. Generally speaking, once you get north of 45, that makes a huge difference. So 47 or 48 versus 44, 45 is a pretty big difference. Sort of the same thing happens around 60. 59 is much more appealing than 62. Same thing happens around 90, 88, 89, much more appealing than 90. Certainly at 99 versus 100 or 101 or 105. 140, 145 to 149, much more appealing than 150 to 155. So it's just that, like, basically these price breaks where people are more inclined to spend a little more out of their comfort zone if it doesn't quite feel out of their comfort zone. And it's amazing, by shifting $1 or $2 can dramatically impact subconsciously a person's decision to buy or not buy. So EU wine tariffs from the United States are destroying our industry. And there's a huge misunderstanding of them. There are two different tariff disputes. One was, I'll do this real quick because it's complicated, but one was the digital services tax, and that's the thing that Trump and Macron both tweeted like, oh, there won't be a tariff, we're good till next year. But that was just a proposal of a tariff on champagne. The really big one is the Airbus-Boeing dispute, where the WTO, the World Trade Organization, has said yes, the EU was illegally subsidizing Airbus. Dear United States, you are legally entitled to $7.5 billion a year of retaliatory measures to recoup the losses from these unfair trade practices. I don't disagree that we're owed that money. The problem is this isn't a dispute with an airline company, and for whatever reason, the decision was made to tariff beverages which have nothing to do with the airline industry. So you might have heard that we were spared the potential 100% tariffs on all European Union wines, and thank goodness we were, though that's still up for reconsideration on the carousel again in August. So at any point between now and August, they could decide, yep, 100% tariffs on everything from the EU. But there still exists, what people don't realize, a 25% tariff on UK, French, Spanish, and German wines not sparkling under 14% alcohol. In the case of Germany, that's like 95% of their exports to the United States. This means that like small importers and small distributors might have to come up with $20,000 or $30,000 more for a container of wine that's pre-purchased and pre-sold. Yeah, I know businesses have already closed. I know people that have been laid off. I know importers and distributors that are running out of product because they're so scared that new tariffs could come. They're not willing to risk having 3 containers of wine on the water, and if a new tariff comes in, suddenly they're at $100,000 that they can't recoup. So tariffs don't really ever work, but wine tariffs, especially about an unrelated industry, need to go away, and until they do, I will not rest. I am actively involved in the USWTA, the United States Wine Trade Alliance. We are a grassroots organization, over 7,000 strong now, and we're barely 2 months old. We've just incorporated 501c status, and basically we are thousands of concerned individuals that work in some aspects of this industry, whether importers, distributors, restaurateurs, sommeliers, retail, that recognize how devastating these will be to our industry. And let me be clear, this is like truck drivers losing their jobs, dock workers, warehouse workers, bussers, cooks, dishwashers, runners, hosts and hostesses, administrative staff. This isn't just about, oh, our wine costs more, so that's a problem. This is like a potential loss of $20 billion of revenue in the United States, of which 85% of that money stays in the US, and it's about the potential shuttering of up to 6,500 businesses along the import and distribution network, which then could lead to thousands and thousands of restaurants not being able to be profitable. So the USWTA, and please, we have a website, UnitedStatesWineTradeAlliance.org, or you can just Google USWTA, or you can look for it on Facebook. We are just a group of concerned citizens who basically volunteer our time to try to lobby against these tariffs. And we can give you anything you want to talk to your congresspeople, your senators, or your governors, but ultimately, I encourage everyone to write to your members of government and just say, hey, I am against tariffs, here's why. They hurt American jobs. They don't hurt the EU because the demand from our trade competitors, China and Brazil and other trade competitors, is so high that for the reduction in wine exports to the US from the EU that happened because of those October tariffs, every single producer that we have encountered has raised their prices and sold all that shortage to China. So it doesn't hurt the EU, it does hurt the US, and it rewards our biggest trade competitor. So tariffs have to go, and please, by all means, reach out, join our group, reach out to your representatives in government and let them know that this is not the right way forward, and this is not good for America. My name is Erik Segelbaum. It has been a pleasure and a delight. Thank you for tuning in to SOMLYAYBusiness.com, and keep doing great things in beverage.